Greetings, fencers. So this is going to be a breakdown video of my first fight at the Victoria Highland Games Open Longsword. And not only was it my first tournament match, it was also my first time getting to fight other dedicated HEMA practitioners. All of the people I'd fought previously had actually been taught by me, so didn't really know what to expect. There's a lot more rules than standard sport fencing, because historical European martial arts is meant to simulate unarmored combat, and so the rules are meant to enforce that. For a cut to be valid, it should have minimum 75 degrees of rotation, good edge alignment, and sufficient speed and force. Now, a controlled thrust is worth 5 points. The reason for that being it's the safest way to attack an individual. It locks the opponent's sword so they can't hit you afterwards, and it prevents an afterblow. An afterblow is where a fighter can actually hit after being struck in the same tempo to reduce the opponent's score by 1 point. A double hit is the worst outcome. Both opponents hit each other at the same time. That would result in 2 deaths in real life, and so 3 double hits, and both fighters actually lose the match. Grappling is allowed, however, there are no throws or takedowns simply because some people don't have good joints, and so that's an easy cause for injury. Although we're using sufficient force, you don't want to be using 100% force, you can still injure people, and sportsmanship is always encouraged. Fighters can self-call hits or say that their own hit wasn't good enough. I was nervous, so I tested with the point a little bit, but ended up defaulting to a play that I've practiced hundreds of times with my left foot forward. I cover with a cut and use a full sword rotation to strike the arm. End up actually hitting his head with the covering cut, because his cut ended up being a feint, but only the arm hit was seen, so 1 point. This is actually the very first wide-range play in a 1410 manuscript, Flower of Battle. Here my opponent feints a thrust and circles around to cut at my head. I was close to using the same play again, but see the cut and go into a hanging guard. From there I use running off to power my cut at his head. This awards me 4 points. Running off for a blowfin can actually be seen in the same manuscript in a play called The Peasant Strike. It is also frequently mentioned by Joachim Meyer and Hans Lekuchner. Here I end up using the same move my opponent attempted on me. I feinted with a thrust to get him to guard, but as Joachim Meyer says, I do not let the blades touch and circle to the opening he just left, in this case his top right. I only managed to hit the arm, so only 1 point, and you can see his sword lightly drops on my shoulder afterwards, but doesn't actually have any speed and rotation, so it's not valid for an afterblow. Here my opponent approaches me in Flug, and I wait for him to pull his sword to a backwards guard position and attack instantly. I then crowd his sword after to make the afterblow difficult. His sword isn't able to gain speed and rotation and just pushes me with the strong. He's a little bit too far, and so I only managed to hit his hand, only 1 point. We each throw a couple cuts out of measure to see reactions. Here I was able to beat him with the onset cut, but my sword landed completely flat. You can see the bend. He comes in and pushes me with his hands and is able to get his cut around faster. Good play by him. Gets me on the shoulder, 1 point.
So we have 1 point blue. 1 point blue. Fight!
This exchange I actually managed to get my point on his chest, but couldn't stick it, and it flies upwards. He gets his sword on target first, hitting the mask with the tip and also the flat. My cut comes right after with also just hitting the tip and flat. Neither of those were good strikes, but both were counted, which is fine. Even when you're there, it's hard to see. 4 points, -1 for the afterblow, so 3 points for him. I'm a little nervous after that almost failed parry, so I decided to keep my point online. I attempted to get away with a quick arm cut, but it doesn't work out. Here you can see my failed parry, but luckily I stopped most of the power, even though it broke through. Just a bit of a scratch, maybe an ear missing, but nothing fight-ending. Here I fake with a thrust and circle to the other opening and get the arm, but the feint wasn't convincing enough that he cuts into me instead. I lost time from that and couldn't get out fast enough. Sacrificing a head for an arm hit is not worth it. 1 point for arm, but -1 for afterblow. No points. Here we both come in with horizontal cuts. We both realize this and pull out, hitting each other just with the very tips of our swords. He then cuts at my waist as I retreat, but his cut lands flat. There are actually 3 judges circling the ring deciding what's valid. In this case, only 1 judge saw a valid cut, but the 2 others did not, so no exchange. Here I attempted my common play, cut and circle around, but the cut intended for the shoulder hits the side with a moderately flat angle. I wasn't happy with it. I was happy, however, with the complete dodge of his sword with my body. Your movement is what saves you, sword is just covering you. I actually could have won the match there, but felt the cut was insufficient and called it off myself. You can also see the 1 judge on my side also considered it invalid. Here he misses with the low cut, and he gets close enough that I can't get my point on line for the thrust. Here he completely tricked me, but hit me with just the tip. Then my cut was low in rotation and hit with the tip as well, so no exchange was given.
No quality on the. Okay, thank you. No exchange, just tips, gentlemen. No exchange. Fight with intent. Fight!
This exchange is not one of my favorites. I see him start with his big steps, and I don't want to get closer, so I don't step and just cut. My cut lands first, right on the head, but he actually aimed for my legs. There was enough time between cuts that his cut counted as an afterblow, so 4 minus 1. In real life, this would not be a good outcome for either of us. In general, I never cut below the belly button with a longsword. 90% of my targeting is at the head.
4 minus 1 red. Match red. Good honor.
Matches at this tournament either ended by a 90-second time limit or first to 9 points. The score for this match was 10-4.